We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Tesam and Beis in Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 59b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing a Mitzorah, and the Mitzorah had forgotten to bring the kapara that he needs to bring, and he needs to bring this kapara because he also has to eat from some carbon shlomim which he donated. So the Gemara had said, well, he could bring all of these kaparas after the carbon tamid shel bein harboyim, and the Gemara found a way around all the problems, except the Gemara says, what about the carbon ola that he needs to bring? So the Gemara says, well, maybe we'll just say the carbon ola he already brought before the carbon tamid. He doesn't need to bring it after. Gemara said, well, doesn't the carbon ola always have to come after the carbon chata? So how could you say he brought the ola before the tamid, and now he's going to bring the carbon chatas after? And the Gemara here answers that the Mitzorah's carbon is an exception, because the pasuk says, v'helo hakohen. It says the kohen brings it up. Esa ola, he brings up the carbon ola, meaning shehe'elo kvar, it was already brought up. So in this particular case, the carbon ola can be first. Rashi says, "V'hela kohen es ola v'samincha v'gomer bepar chatas ksiv u'midahavle l'michtav ve'esa ola ya'aleh." It should have said ya'aleh u'chsiv v'hela. Instead, it says v'hela mashma afilu hevia ola kodem l'chatas yichaper. The mashmo says you can bring the carbon ola earlier, and that solves that problem. So again, that is how it's possible to bring these carbonos for the Mitzorah after the carbon tamid shel bein harboyim, in order that he can be pure and eat whatever other carbon he needs to eat from. Amar le Rav Shemin bar Abba le Rav Papa. Rav Shemin bar Abba said to Rav Papa, Lidi doch the amrit mala umalina barosha shel mizbeach. According to you, your solution was that the Mitzorah should bring his carbon chatas and he should just leave it there at the top of the mizbeach, and then they'll burn it the next morning, because the real issue, the real prohibition, is to burn the carbon on the mizbeach after the tamid shel bein harboyim. So if you just leave it there overnight, you're not burning it, it's not a problem. So he says, according to your explanation, kaiminon v'avdinon milsa lekohanim dasu bali de takala. You're going to end up doing something that's going to cause a takala. It's going to cause a stumbling block for the kohanim. When they see this carbon sitting up there in the top of the mizbeach, they're not going to realize what's going on. The savre de yomehu, they're going to think this was a carbon that was brought that day. V'yasu lakture, and they're going to end up actually burning it, not realizing that this is a problem. You can't burn it. It's after the tamid shel bein harboyim. Amar lei, so he said to him, Kohanim zrizim him. The Kohanim are zrizim. They're very careful. They're not going to make such a mistake. Rashi over here says, the savre de yomehi, they'll think it's of that day. Kishemaktirim kol alayla evarim shenitos from ikarbonos shenishchatu v'nizrak dam and kodem l'tamid. The whole night, what do? They burn over any leftover limbs from the karbonos. That's what's burning all night on the mizbeach. V'yiru es evarim halal. They're going to see these limbs as well. Yehu svurin shagam eila nitosru. They'll think these are just leftovers. We can burn them. U'ra'uyin la'aktirim hayom. We can burn them today. V'aktirim va'avri asay da'ashlama. They won't realize that they're really doing the ikar haktara of this particular carbon after the tamid shel bein harboyim, which is going to be a problem. So the Gemara ends up answering the Kohanim are zrizim. They know exactly what's going on. They're careful. They're not going to do this. Amar le Rav Ashi le Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, V'amri lo Rav Huna b'reider Rav Nasan le Rav Papa. Some have a version that it was Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nasan, said to Rav Papa, V'hakama de lo miskatri emurin. But the halach is like this: as long as you haven't burned the emurin on the mizbeach, Kohanim lo matzu achli basar. The Kohanim cannot eat their portion of the carbon, their portion of the meat. The Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Yochel Yehu Kohanim Rashoin B'chazav V'shok Kodem Haktaras Emurin. I might think Kohanim are allowed to eat the chazav v'shok. Those are the parts of the carbon that go to them. I might think they can eat that before the burning of the emurin, of the insides of the animal on the mizbeach. Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, V'hikter HaKohen es ha'chelev ha'mizbecha. It says first the Kohen has to burn the chelev. That's the burning of the carbon on the mizbeach. V'hadar v'haya ha'chaza li'arnu levanav. And only then can the Kohanim eat the chaza, eat what belongs to them from the carbon. And the Gemara says further, V'kama to Kohanim lo achli basar. As long as the Kohanim have not eaten their portion of the carbon, their meat, bailim lo mischapri. The owners are not going to get the kapara. And the whole point over here is that the owners should get a kapara so they can be pure, so they can eat whatever other kachim they need to eat. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, va'achlu osam asher kupar bohem. They eat them, those who get the kapara, melamed shakohanim ochlim ubailim eskaprin. The way you understand that pasuk is that the kohanim eat, and then the bailim get a kapara. So we have a problem over here, because if you're going to just leave this carbon on top of the mizbeach, you're not going to burn the part you need to burn on the mizbeach. The kohanim then won't be able to eat their portion. The bailim won't get their kapara, and we're back to square one. The whole point of this was to give the bailim a kapara so that they could eat whatever other kachim they need to eat. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, Kevon de lo efshar, since it's impossible any other way, there's just nothing they can do about it. they can't burn it on top of the Mizbeach right now, because you're not allowed to burn something, a carbon on the Mizbeach after the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. Asom Kamisha Nitmu Osha Avdu. We treat it as if it was a carbon that became Tameh or became lost. The Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, Yachol Nitmu Emurin. I might think that if the Emurim, again, the parts of the carbon, the insides of the animal that are burned on the Mizbeach, I might think that if they became Tameh, Osha Avdu, or if they became lost, Lo Yehu Kohanim Zakoyin B'chaz of Ashok, that the Kohanim don't get to partake from the Chaz of Ashok. I might have thought that that is the case. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, "V'haya chaza li Aaron u'levanav." It says the chaza belongs to Aaron and his children. Mikol makom, in all situations, meaning even if you have some kind of accident. Yes, it's true. In general, you should burn the emurin first, and only then the kohanim should partake from the chaza and the shok of the animal. But that's only true in general. If you have a situation where the circumstance says you can't burn the emurim, it's tameh, they became lost, or in our case, it's impossible to burn, because it would be a violation of burning a carbon after the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim, so then it's considered basically a situation where you don't have to do it, and the Kohanim are allowed to partake from the carbon. And the Gemara continues, Rav Kahana found the following contradiction in Psukim. Ksiv, it says in the Pasuk, Lo Yolin Chelev Chagi Ad Boker. It says you can't leave over the Chelev of my carbon until morning. So the implication is, Ad Boker Hu Delo Yolin. You can't leave it over until morning. Hakol Halayla Kula Yolin, but the night is fine. Uchsiv, and the pasuk also says, "V'hikter aleh chelvei ashlamim." It says you're going to burn the chelvei ashlamim. Aleh hashlam kolar karbonos kulan. As we said before the drasha, all karbonos have to be finished before the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. There is a problem leaving it through the night. We'll see Rashi. In any case, the Gemara says, "Hu mosiv la v'hu mefarik la." He asked the question and he answered the question. Kishani toaster. We're talking about when it is left over. Rashi here explains. Hakol alayla yolin. The implication of the pasuk is the whole night you could leave it, meaning yolin lamata, you leave it below the mizbeach. Umalon umaktiron kol alayla. Sounds like you can be burning it all night. So you have this carbon, you have it that you didn't yet bring it up to the mizbeach. It's already nighttime, and you burn it through the night. V'yeino nifsal. That's not a psul elam kein matzon ba'alos hashachar kashu lamata. The only problem is if by dawn, if when morning comes, it's still below the mizbeach, that's a problem. Alma kolalayla roy lahaktir. The point is, it sounds like a carbon can be burned all night, certainly can be burned after the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. V'aksiv aleh hashlim the mashma shelo yisakiv davar achar Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. As we said before, you're not supposed to bring anything after the carbon Tamid of the evening. So he answered Kishani Tosru. What it means when you have to burn things through the night, it's when it's left over, meaning mikarbanos shenizrak damon kodem Tamid. We're talking specifically, if you have a carbon where you did the zrika, you spritz the blood before the carbon Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. Below his spiku lahakra, but you just didn't have enough time to bring the whole carbon. The kevon denira lahakrava kodem lachain, since it was ready for hakrava before the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim, al Tamid Shel Shachar hu mushlam, that's considered that it was brought on the carbon Tamid Shel Shachar, meaning it was brought after the Tamid Shel Shachar, not brought after the carbon Tamid Shel Ben Arboim. So basically, Rav Kahana is saying, if you actually did the zrika before the Tamid Shel Ben Arboim, that's when everything is okay. The Gemara continues, Rami le Rav Safra le Rav. Rav Safra had the following contradiction for Rav. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Lo yolin la boker zeva chag ha-pesach. It says you can't leave over till the morning, the carbon Pesach. So la boker hu de lo yolin. The morning is a problem to leave it over. Hakol alayla yolin, but the nighttime is not a problem. You're allowed to burn it through the night. V'haksiv, but doesn't the pasuk say, Olas Shabbos b'Shabbato, a carbon ol of Shabbos on Shabbos? V'lo olas chol b'Shabbos, you can't bring a weekday carbon on Shabbos. V'lo olas chol b'Yontiv, you can't bring a weekday ola on Yontiv. So how could you bring this carbon Pesach, which is a chol carbon, it's really brought on your dalit, how could you bring it through the night of Yontiv? Rashi over here says, Hakol alayla yolin, meaning v'yaktirenu b'leila Yontiv. Sounds like you can burn the carbon Pesach through the night of Yontiv. On the Mizbeach, v'yafal pishanosar mi carbon shel chol, even though that's really leftover from a weekday carbon. When you sprinkle the blood of the carbon Pesach, it's a weekday. So how could you do that? So the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, Kvar Ramyo Nehile Rav Abba bar Chia le Rabbi Avohu. Rav Abba bar Chia already told this contradiction over to Rabbi Avohu. V'shani Lei, and he answered him, Hacha bar ba'asar shechol lios b'Shabbos haskinon. The pasuk is talking specifically about when the 14th falls out on Shabbos. The chelvei Shabbos kreven b'Yomtiv. So then it's already the chelev of Shabbos. That could be brought on Yontiv, so it could be brought through the night of Pesach because it's a carbon of Shabbos in that particular case. Amar Lei said to him, Misham the chelvei Shabbos kreven b'Yomtiv. Just because you know of a halacha that the chelev of Shabbos, the carbon portion that's burned on the Mizbeach of Shabbos can be brought on Yontiv. Now we're going to just suggest that a particular pasuk is talking about such a scenario where the 14th happened to fall out on Shabbos. It's strange to say that the pasuk is talking davka only in that scenario. Amar Lei said to him, Shavke Lakra, leave aside the pasuk. Do dochik, because it's a dochik pasuk. So therefore it shows, it lends itself to this interpretation. It's not dochik at all to give this pshat in the pasuk. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, HaPesach sheshachtu shelo lishmo. Let's say you shech the Korban Pesach, but not lishma, not for the sake of a Korban Pesach. V'kibel v'holach v'zarak shelo lishmo. He receives the blood, he walks it over, he sprinkles it also, not lishmo. He doesn't do it for the sake of the Korban Pesach. O lishmo v'shelo lishmo, or he does it partially lishmo, partially not lishmo. O shelo lishmo v'lishmo, or the other way around. Pasul, he's going to be pasul in these cases. Keitzad lishmo v'shelo lishmo. What does it mean you do it for the Pesach but not? It means l'shem Pesach or l'shem shlamim. You do it for the Korban Pesach, but then you also do it for Korban shlamim. And what's shelo lishmo v'lishmo? What's the reverse order? L'shem shlamim. First you do it l'shem shlamim or l'shem Pesach, and then you do it l'shem Pesach. And Rashi over here says, HaPesach sheshachtu shelo lishmo. You shech the Korban Pesach, not lishmo, meaning l'shem shlamim. You do it for the sake of a Korban shlamim, a standard shlamim, instead of a Korban Pesach. O kibel, o halach, o zarak shelo lishmo, or you did any of the other major parts of the Korban, receiving of the blood, the walking of the blood, the sprinkling of the blood, any of those shelo lishmo. Sheba'arba avodos halalu ha-pesach nifsal b'machshavtan. It's these 4 avodos. These are the critical avodos. If you have the wrong machshava, it's going to be a problem. O lishmo v'shelo lishmo, it said in the Mishnah, what if you do partial lishmo, partial not lishmo, but gemar mefarash ibn machshavas avoda achas kamar? Is this all within one avoda that you switch your intention, ibn machshavas shtei avodas, or is it within 2 different avodas? Kagon kiba lishmo v'zarak shelo lishmo, like maybe you received the blood with the proper intention, but then you sprinkled it not. In any case, pasul, it's pasul d'chsiv zevach pesachu shethez v'chasul l'shem pesach. It needs to be done for the sake of a Korban Pesach. It says who means to say, if it was not done l'shmo, if it was not shechted l'shmo, it's going to be a problem. So the Gemara asks, as Rashi pointed out, boy Rav Papa asks, ba'avoda achas tanan, is the Mishnah mean within one avoda, meaning within the same avoda you had the right machshava and then you had the wrong machshava? Is that what we're saying in the Mishnah? O b'shtei avodos tanan, or are we talking about 2 separate avodos? Rashi says, ba'avoda achas tanan, v'chisha bo l'shmo v'shelo l'shmo. Within one avoda, you had the machshava correct and then you had it incorrect. V'afilu achi katani pasul, and it's still pasul. V'Rabbi Yossi, if that would be the case, it would show that the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi. Da'amar b'Meseches Tmura af b'gmar devarav adam nitfas. Rabbi Yossi holds how you finish your words, or in this case, how you finish your thought, it could be a problem. So over here, you might have started out lishmo, but if you finished shelo lishmo, Rabbi Yossi is going to say it's a problem. That would be if it was avoda achas, or no, we're talking about 2 avodos. Ba'avoda achas tanan v'Rabbi Yossi. If the Mishnah is talking about all within one avoda, then it's going to follow the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. The Amar af b'gemar devarav adam nitfas. Rabbi Yossi holds the gemar devarav, the way it finishes, the person can be caught with that. That can render it pasul. The Rabbi Meir, because if it's Rabbi Meir, ha'amar tzfos lashon rishon, he says we take what you said at first. Rashi says the Rabbi Meir ha'amar tzfos lashon rishon. The Meseches Tmura gave omer harezu tmuras ola tmuras shlamim. Guy says this should be an exchange of an ola and for a shlamim. So Rabbi Meir omer harezu tmuras ola. Meir says you follow the first phrase, the ola. Rabbi Yossi omer devar of kayamim. Rabbi Yossi says we accept his words. V'tira shetumam v'timacher v'yave b'dmei chetzia ola u'v'dmei chetzia shlamim. Rabbi Yossi basically says it has to graze till it gets a mum, then you sell it, and then you use the money to buy half ola, half shlamim, because you have to take seriously what he said ola, but you also have to take seriously what he said at the end, a Korban shlamim. So again, Rabbi Yossi takes into consideration gemar devarav, the end of his words, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samich Amud Aleph.